So I'm going to take off, like, because from a legal standpoint, that all makes sense, right? And I studied law at university. So I think you got a case, man, and I think you're probably right in the reason why no one has sued you. Okay, so I'm gonna take off my lawyer's hat for a second, or like my could have been a lawyer's hat.
Sure.
I never did the IPLS or the bar, but then as a guitarist and a songwriter, I'm like, hang on a second here. Are you saying that because to me, inherently, it feels like the melody is an inherent part of the thing that you've created. And I feel like as a musician, I want to be able to sue people who steal that from me. So like because you also mentioned in your TED Talk and stuff that you're a musician as well. So like
I am.
what does your musician's head say on this? Like do you not
So,
feel the ownership of a tune once you've composed it?
yes. Maybe I should give listeners a bit more background. I have a bachelor's degree in music. So I have a 4-year degree in music. I was going to be a music teacher. I also have a law degree, and I'm also a coder. So the law plus tech plus music is part of my DNA. And from a musician with my musician hat on, think about what aspects there are of a song. One of them is the chord structure, right? The chords that I have is very much a part of my song, but that is not copyrightable.
Hmm.
Right, you cannot copyright a chord changes because the courts have said there are only so many chord changes. Right, so you can't have a monopoly. One person can't have a monopoly for their life plus 70 years on the chord structure. Okay, so that's one aspect of the song. A second aspect of the song is also the drums, the rhythm. And so the beats that you have, especially in hip hop and others, that is certainly a huge part of the song. But the courts have again and again said that beats are not copyrightable. You can't copyright the I forget who the something shuffle. But anyway, there's a famous beat that is repeated on thousands of songs, but nobody can copyright that beat. Timbre is a very big part of any song, but you can't copyright timbre. Right, you can't copyright this sound of this kind of thing. So anyway, so there's all sorts of elements that are inherently part of a song that are not copyrightable. So really, the question is, much like chords, much like beats, are melodies just amongst those other things that in isolation are not copyrightable. And the reason, an example of why that might be true is that if you think about A, B, C, D, E, F, G is the same melody as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, which is the same melody as Baa Baa Black Sheep, Have You Any Wool, right? Each of those has the same melody, but they are different songs. I say that to people that are in their 50s, and they're like, gosh, I've lived 50 years. I've never realized that those three share the same melody. And the reason for that is because they're different songs. Even though they share the same melody, they are different songs and they occupy different spaces in our heads. So really, as a musician, what are you, if the Baa Baa Black Sheep people were to sue the Twinkle Twinkle people, the Twinkle Twinkle people would say, what the hell? Nobody even associates my song with your song. They're different songs. We can each share the same melody without having to fight this thing out. Let's just stop suing each other and just make more music. Because what is it as a musician? What am I making? Am I making a song so that nobody else can share any attribute of my song? No, that's stupid. I, as a musician, make song because it is worth making. I want to make art, right? And so it's not an exclusionary activity. We can all make art, and all of our art can be essentially, putting forth to humanity to make humanity better. We shouldn't think of making art as something that is exclusive to me. I should think about it. We're all drawing from the same melodic well. There are only so many melodies, and we're all drawing from them.
Hmm. See, you're still making sense, but then when I really think about it, I'm like, yeah, but what if I came up with this really catchy tune? I,
But what if you came up with that really catchy tune, and then you realized later that Bach came up with that same really catchy tune, and Mozart also came up with that really catchy tune, or somebody in the 1950s, still under copyright, came up with that really catchy tune? Should that 1950s person be able to sue you? But the answer is no, because you came up with it independently, right? But the problem with the case law is under the George Harrison case, that person could sue you.
mm,
And that person could say, you know what? You subconsciously infringed the 1950s person because you may have heard it over a supermarket loudspeaker, or you may have heard it in some waiting room somewhere. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve, is that, yeah, you came up with this really catchy tune, but somebody else probably came up with it before you.
Mm.
And so should they be able to sue you over that really catchy tune?
How many melodies did you say you brute forced?
Uh,
312,000?
no, far more than that. Our initial data set was 68 billion with a B.
Right.
We are now up to 470 billion with a B. So 470,000 million.
Okay. That's quite a bit more than I said. So how can you propose that there's the chance that people will make the same melody when we're talking about 470 or 4,700 billion? Yeah.
Yeah, 470 billion. So the odds of someone accidentally landing on the same melody, it's hard to be able to put because are you talking about a 3-note melody? Are you talking about a 10-note melody? Are you talking about a 50-note melody? Right. So then it really depends on the duration of the melody. But I will say, I will give you the mathematics on how many combinations there are. So if you think about the number up, so you think do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 8. And if you have a 3-note melody, that is the mathematics on that is 8 to the 3rd power. So 8 times 8 times 8, which ends up being, what is 8 times 8 times 8? Someone is going to be able to tell me much faster than I'm able to put it here. But I now be able to say that is 512.
Oh, we're not live.
So,
don't worry. This is pre-recorded.
Right. No, well, that's fine. So that 8 times 8 times 8. So that's 8 to the 3rd power is 512.
Mm.
So the number of 3-note melodies that are an octave in a diatonic scale, there are only 512 combinations of that 3-note melody. There's do, 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 there's do, do, re, do, do, mi, do, do, fa.
Yeah.
And there's only 512 of those. So the odds of accidentally landing on a 3-note melody on the diatonic scale is a 1 in 512.
Okay. That seems slightly more plausible.
It does. And then if you go to 4-note melody, right, it's a little more. But then you also have if you have a melody that's do, 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 nobody's going to listen to it, right? And same with do, 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 right? Nobody's going to listen to it. So there are only a subset of those that are actually inherently pleasing, aesthetically pleasing. And so really of that 512, what subset are aesthetically pleasing? And the odds of landing on those aesthetically pleasing ones are much higher.
Okay. So then, theoretically, has anyone actually approached you from the music world about this? Like, so anyone from, I don't know, some like big record labels or I don't know, music producers or artists, have they approached you about this idea? Or about,
Indeed,
well, not even idea, what you've done.
Yes. So after the talk became very popular, and at this point it's had 1.5 million views. So it's become very popular. I've been invited into a music industry group where the large music industry executives from Sony Music, from Disney Music, from YouTube, from Spotify, we all gather and discuss affairs of the day, including copyright, including technology in music and how it affects each other. So I've been able to rub elbows, if you will, and be able to talk about the implications of my project and many other projects with some of the biggest leaders in the music industry. So I've been really fortunate that way to be able to get to know, for example, the former chief economist of Spotify, the guy who figures out how music is going to make money, and be able to talk about how my project might improve the work that musicians are doing these days. So that's all I've always saying. Yes, I've been very fortunate to be able to talk with some of the largest legal luminaries as well as musical luminaries.
There's probably quite a lot of artists that are hoping that you do end up making this legal precedent, I would say, in the future. Although I'm not sure if it would retroactively force them to not, like, if your case, because I'm thinking about one of my favorite bands, Oasis, who have been famous for allegedly plagiarizing melodies from people and have been sued successfully a number of times, actually. Including by Stevie Wonder, who made them remove one of the tracks, or well, his demand for royalties was too high and made them remove one of the tracks on the What's the Story Morning Glory album. But so would that like affect cases that have already gone ahead and happened?
So it's funny that you'd ask, because before my talk, pretty much every You Stole My Melody lawsuit defendant has lost. And the reason for that is because of this subconscious infringement that I talked about earlier. That, like, for example, in the case of George Harrison told the court, "I've never heard the Chiffon song before in my life." And the judge says, I believe you. George Harrison, that you've never heard that song before in your life. But what I think you did is you subconsciously infringed, that you don't remember hearing it, but you did hear it. Therefore, you're subconsciously infringed. The problem with that is that there is no way to prove a negative. Philosophically and logically, there's no way to prove that you've never heard something. I never heard it over the radio, never heard it in a friend's car, never heard it in the supermarket. So before my talk, every defendant lost because of this problem of never being able to prove a negative. Every defendant has lost. So Katy Perry, for example, lost $2.8 million on a Tuesday. And that's what the jury verdict was. My TED Talk was on a Saturday. And so my TED Talk, the melody that Katy Perry got sued over was, this is literally the melody. Dun, 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 dun. Really simple melody, just descending scale. Dun, 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 dun. That data set, that melody shows up in my 68 billion data set 8,128 times. So the question is, as I alluded in my talk, should we give that person that sued Katy Perry monopoly for life of the author plus 70 years for something that my computer cranked out 300,000 melodies per second. And we made 8,000 of those things in my data set. So maybe we shouldn't do that. So anyway, so my talk, jury verdict on Tuesday, my talk was done on Saturday, released a few months later. After my talk was released and became very popular, that judge reversed the jury verdict, essentially using the arguments that I was making in my talk.
Wow.
My talk was saying essentially there are only so many melodies, and there's the odds of accidentally landing on them is so high that we shouldn't, for trite melodies like dun 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 dun, we shouldn't give somebody a monopoly. So she made that argument, and she made that as a matter of law, which has actually reversed that judge's previous discussion as a matter of law. She had denied it as a matter of law earlier in the case, but then granted it as a matter of law later in the case after my TED Talk. Similarly, the Led Zeppelin case happened after my TED Talk and essentially used the same arguments as I did, saying that there are only so many melodies, and this is not a creative enough melody to be copyrightable. Importantly, on the UK side of it, Ed Sheeran's case, he released a statement afterward, and you could have essentially taken his statement from my TED Talk, saying there are only so many melodies. There are only so many melodies, especially in pop music, and the odds of overlapping are very high. And that's the argument I've been making. So anyway, so even though I haven't had a court case with my particular project, my arguments have been resonating with juries and judges around the world.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.